Excuse me while I trip over my sedated dog. It's, as you can tell, it's warm. I'm like sweating and it's like maybe 90 already and it ain't even noon. And thunder showers, and my dog all of a sudden don't like thunder, so I had to basically, for lack of better words, try to sedate her last night, which really didn't work. Now she's sort of like loopy today, which kind of sucks, but hey, I gotta do what I gotta do. Before we start this one, a couple passings to note. The other dog starts making fucking noise, but at least we don't got the bones anymore. Philip Baker Hall passed away at age 90. Philip was a noted character actor. He was in Seinfeld, The Loop, also films like Boogie Nights, and I've seen him play mob bosses on a couple of occasions, but don't remember which movies they were. And also wrestler Tarzan Goto passed away at age 58 from liver cancer. Now, Tarzan may not be a household name to a lot of people, but to wrestling fans, he did come over here, I believe, in the 80s at one point and wrestled for some southern territories. But his big thing was he was a big star in FMW, Frontier Martial Arts promotion, with Anita as the owner. And they were involved in a bunch of really weird matches. I believe that Tarzan did come over to ECW and have a couple matches with Axel Rotten, where he won. But the one that stands out was they had a fire match in Japan between Onita and Goto versus the original Sheik and Sabu. Now, what they did was they wrapped kerosene-soaked rags around the ring ropes and set them on fire. What they didn't realize was that this thing got out of control, sucked all the oxygen out of the ring, and basically you had four guys trapped in a ring that was burning up. The parts of the rags were dropping off and landing on the canvas and setting them on fire. Basically, the guys had to scramble out under the fire. The Sheik was burned pretty badly. They all got pretty badly burned. And I remember watching a DVD with Sabu and Chris Candido watching this thing, and Chris turned to Sabu and he goes, "Well, that didn't seem to be too well planned out, did it?" Well, they had to evacuate the building, call in the fire department, and never had another fire match as far as I know, at least one that fucked up. But of course, Onita is still around. He actually did come over here last year and had an exploding ring match with Matt Tremont in a baseball stadium somewhere, I guess outside down somewhere in South Jersey. But that's neither here nor there, just wanted to pay tribute to those guys. I keep saying that I'm going to cover these two films on this poster behind me, Beast of the Yellow Night and Creature with the Blue Hand. So let me do that because, okay, it was 1971 when the double bill came out. Of course, I was just getting my driver's license in 1970, so I was hot to see these films at a drive-in, because when I saw the name of the director, Eddie Romero, and the star, John Ashley, I immediately thought this was going to be a sequel to Beast of Blood from the Blood Island series. Well, it wasn't. Not that a sequel wasn't planned. There was a sequel planned called Horrors of Blood Island, but Romero and Ashley had cut a deal with Roger Corman's New World Pictures, which obviously was giving them more money. So they jumped ship from Hemisphere, and Hemisphere was left holding the bag for another Blood Island movie. So Sam Sherman stepped in and gave us the pretty awful Brain of Blood to fill in, which really there's not too much I can say about that film, especially when you use a pound of ground chuck as a brain. But anyway, seeing this at a drive-in really wasn't the place to see it. But like I said, just got my license. It was cool because at a drive-in you can smoke, you can drink, and maybe if you're lucky, get laid in your car. So the problem was with a lot of things you saw at a drive-in, especially stuff that had a lot of night scenes, is they were dark and you didn't see them. So not that there wasn't ample amounts of violence and gore in Beast of the Yellow Night. At that point, I was probably 18 and, was expecting something totally different. In retrospect, however, this film, which was also written by Eddie Romero, is a pretty solid movie going back. And here it is. It was just put out a few years ago by VCI on Blu-ray from a 2K scan of the original 35mm negative, which gives it a much clearer picture. Now the thing was, this thing is a more cerebral film than Eddie was used to putting out, as far as, after he did all the Blood Island and stuff. It centers around this soldier, Joe Langdon, who basically was a POW, a degenerate rapist who basically ratted out his fellow POWs and helped torture them, and then escaped and was hiding up in the hills with the mountain people, but even they were fed up with his murderous raping ways and left him alone. So this is, of course, at the close of World War II. As the soldiers are pursuing the wounded Langdon through the jungle, he stumbles and falls and hears a voice telling him that, we can make this easy for you. Basically, you can serve me and you're dying anyway. So basically, it's the voice of Satan. And Satan is played by Vic Diaz. And in this scene, he's a native sitting in a tree with a bag of something. So basically, Langdon sells his soul for a bag of rotting meat to eat. So now he has sold his soul to the devil. There's another scene where Vic is standing in a suit by a gravesite, which was Langdon's last, I guess, incarnation, because it seems like he is put into the bodies of people that are about to die or about to fuck up, and, he continues his evil that way. Well, he's in the grave and saying, "Can't you leave me alone?" And Satan says, "Well, no, you made a deal, you have things to do." So basically, he is put into a body of a guy who was badly injured in an accident and facially disfigured. And his bandages are pulled off to reveal John Ashley. So the thing is, he is married to a woman played by Mary Catherine Wilcox, a Canadian actress who basically, in my opinion, really couldn't act in this whole thing. She's more of standing around window dressing as this, wife that doesn't understand what's going on. Well, the Langdon character basically fires all the members of the board, because I guess the body he took over was this big important guy. And he's roaming around at night. He's drawn to a church. Well, all of a sudden he gets cramps and doubles over, and this old man goes over to check out what's going on, and he pops up. He is this horrible werewolf-looking like creature who basically slices this guy open and rips his guts out and is there eating his guts until he's pursued and he escapes capture. Well, the next night he's sort of like being seduced by his wife, but then breaks that off and goes into his room where he transforms into this creature again and pries open the bars and sneaks out into the night. Erroneously, back when we saw this at the drive-in, we thought that, when he gets sexually aroused, he turns into this creature, but it's not the case. So he finds some girl just standing there waiting. I guess she's a prostitute or something, and he rips her throat out. Well, he's pursued by the locals, which he proceeds to slice and dice in a very gory scene, because everybody he hits gets laid open with huge gashes. Well, he goes into this warehouse where there's a blind guy who is basically visiting his nephew, and the blind guy tells him that if you're here to rob me or whatever, there's nothing here to rob. And it winds up that this blind guy was this feared bandit back in the day who was another, killer, nasty guy. And Langdon sort of bonds with this guy, for lack of better words, but Langdon also decides to leave and walks out on the streets with a shirt basically crusted in dried blood. Langdon is arrested by a police lieutenant played by another Filipino regular, Eddie Garcia, and he's visited by Satan, who is now dressed as a guard. And Satan basically is disappointed with him because it seems that Langdon is veering off course here, and then he tells Langdon he is no longer going to control the transformation with Langdon anymore. So Langdon is let out of jail and walks out with his wife under heavily armed guards, but some Filipino guy sneaks through that bunch of guards and stabs Langdon with a big knife. Langdon is unhurt by this whole thing, which basically frosts everybody else out. Langdon is now conflicted, and the police are digging up evidence that this may actually really be Joe Langdon, but he doesn't look like the 45-year-old, degenerate that he would look like, here. So there's a thing where basically Langdon wants to get out of the country or whatever, so this blind ex-bandit decides to try to help him get out. Unfortunately, they hit a roadblock. Now, Langdon, the blind guy, the bandit, for whatever reason, makes a break for it, and he's shot by the guards. Langdon turns and starts ripping guards apart, and bullets, don't seem to affect him. The dying bandit tells the lieutenant to bring me to Langdon, which he does. He brings him over to Langdon. Langdon stands over him and he goes, "Take my hand and pray with me." And Langdon's shaking his head like he can't, but then he finally relents and takes his hand. And I guess that was the segue back into normalcy, because he looks at the lieutenant in his bestial form and the lieutenant shoots him in the heart. Langdon falls back and transforms into what he really is, a 45-year-old man who is now dead. There are some parting words from Satan before the film comes to its end. The film is really well done and really well written and really well put together. Like I said, it's a more cerebral attempt by Eddie Romero to do something other than, just throwing the gore and the fucking entrails around. Creature from the Blue Hand, however, is a different film. Now, supposedly, Sam Sherman had this film and sold it to Roger Corman so he'd have a co-feature for Beast of the All-Night, Beast, Creature, whatever. Creature from the Blue Hand features a razor-clawed killer which predates Freddy Krueger by 17 years. So Freddy Krueger was actually nothing new, and if you want to go back even further, 1959's The Bat with Vincent Price had another razor-clawed killer which predated, again, Elm Street by like over 25 years. So again, this is nothing new. But this film features Klaus Kinski in a dual role as two brothers, Richard and Dave is committed to an asylum for some kind of murder. Very few of these West German Edgar Wallace adaptations ever made it to the big screen in the US. Usually they were regulated to late night TV. But this one and another one called The Mad Executioners actually did run in theaters as co-features. So Dave escapes from the insane asylum and goes back home, and there's a bunch of chicanery because this doctor that was in charge of the asylum answers to somebody on the phone called the boss. Now, what I love about these West German films is they're all filled with, castles with misty outside areas, sliding panels, hidden doors, little peepholes, and things like that. Originally, the guy supposedly murdered was the gardener. And there's a couple more murders going on with this razor-clawed, fiend. And it winds up that maybe Dave wasn't crazy after all, but this other girl gets put in the asylum and is treated to these things opening up which dumps piles of rats and snakes at her feet, and this is pretty creepy too. But again, like I say, this doctor keeps calling this mysterious figure called the boss, and the boss is really prevalent in a lot of these West German films. Circus of Fear had a mysterious figure called the boss, and a few other of these, Edgar Wallace films had other characters called the boss. Well, I believe the boss is actually the other twin, the Crazy Richard character. Now, the strange thing about this was that if Sam Sherman owned this film, he really didn't do shit with it until 1987, where he did this. He released it on Image DVD as The Bloody Dead. Now, what he did was he shot 7 minutes of extra footage had flesh-eating zombies in it, which of course we all know zombies were fucking hot back then, because you had Dawn of the Dead in '79, you had Zombie in 1980, and you had a bunch of other little Italian gut munchers come out. So whatever the deal was, Sam just made this thing The Bloody Dead and threw it out on Image DVD with his exciting co-feature, Creature with the Blue Hand, which is the regular movie. So I'm not sure whether Sam actually owned this or not. We all know that Sam was quite notorious for retitling import flicks and getting a lot of mileage out of them. So who knows what the real deal was, whether Corman had just picked this up, on the flip and maybe flipped it to Sam, or maybe it was vice versa. I really don't know. All I know is this is out of print now, and it'd be really nice that if somebody did a Blu-ray version of the actual creature with the blue hand and threw this bloody dead piece of shit out where it's supposed to be, because it really isn't that good and really mucks up the whole storyline of the creature from the blue hand. So that's our story for today, boys and girls, and I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for subscribing. I also thank you for telling your friends, because people seem to be jumping on the bandwagon. The t-shirts are still on sale at teespring.com under 42Ps, Sleazy Tees, and we also have a New York City Liquidators t-shirt that just debuted there a few days ago. So everybody knows about my tenure at New York City Liquidators and my stories about that. So soon as I get mine, I'll be wearing it on camera. So until then, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the flip side.